Welcome to video 9. If you've been following along with this video series, you should be familiar with this definition that world building is an attempt to accurately reflect the conditions of a specific society in a specific place at a specific point in time. My world building methodology uses the 4 structural categories of governance, economics, social relations, and cultural influences and 14 substructures beneath them to describe the different social forces at play in the world. This video talks about how social forces shape human attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, and how understanding your world's social forces transforms your world-building project into a gigantic engine for generating interesting story ideas. The phrase social forces might sound ominous, as if there's some sort of invisible threat that pushes us around, but the fact is social forces are present in every society, whether we recognize them or not. Here's one benign example. It's generally felt that business settings on the west coast of the United States are more casual than on the east coast. If you wear a flannel shirt to a formal business meeting in New York City, you might feel uncomfortably underdressed. If you wear a business suit to a laid-back meeting in Seattle, you likewise might feel overdressed and stuffy. Objectively speaking, neither flannels nor suits have anything to do with the content of business negotiations. Any sense of discomfort one would feel in either scenario is created by the social norms where the meeting is taking place. Though social forces can and do influence attitudes. A New Yorker may view casual dress as a sign that the person isn't professional or serious about business. A Seattleite may view a business suit as a sign that the person is stiff and will be difficult to work with. But that doesn't need to be the case. They could just as easily say, she must feel better wearing a suit because that's how they do it where she's from. Or a New Yorker could say, I envy that laid-back West Coast approach. So while a local culture may favor one or the other, an individual can hold beliefs that run contrary to the locally established norms. Another way to think about social forces is that they're whatever a local would see as normal, or is at least normal for their community. The kinds of things that outsiders see that a native doesn't even notice. Understanding that our sense of what counts as normal changes over time and place. This is where I want to connect the idea of social forces to the world-building concepts of scope, sequence, perspective, the structural categories, and a catalog populated with a diverse cross-section of people, places, and things. In a 2009 study on the importance of religion by nation, the United States ranked 104 out of 147 nations, which is in the bottom third, but that's a broad generalization about a large, diverse nation. We know that within the United States, certain regions are known for religious faith being very important, while people in other regions do not place much importance on religion at all. Anyone that has traveled can tell you it's not hard to find an a-religious person in the South, and there are plenty of devoutly religious people in the Northeast. While the social forces are quite different in terms of religious influences on those societies, they aren't monocultures. In these southern states, about 75% of people say religion is important in their daily lives, whereas only about 35% say this in the Northeast. Let's say we limited our scope to these 2 regions and created 10 characters in each. In the South, 7 to 8 characters would have strong religious convictions, whereas only 3 would in the Northeast. From a storytelling perspective, it's those minority positions, the people who are the exception to the norm, that often make the most interesting characters. Think about an a-religious New Englander traveling to the deep South, or a deeply religious Southerner traveling to the secular Northeast. The former might wonder why nothing is open on Sunday mornings, and the latter might be disappointed in the lack of choices in church services. Based on their individual personalities, these characters could react in many different ways. They could be outraged, they could be confused, they could be accepting, they could be comfortable with these unfamiliar norms. And religion is just one of the 14 substructures. If I were building a model of different regions for a world-building project, I'd want to go through the process of establishing the values for all 14 categories for comparison. I'd also concentrate on which substructures are particularly strong or weak in certain areas and how that would impact the type and quantity of people, places, and things in the catalog. Good stories need points of tension. Tension comes naturally from characters being out of their element. The affluent Manhattan businesswoman who finds herself in a rural, religious southern town, or the southern country boy who travels to the big city. In both scenarios, it's easy to see how conflicts between characters and worldviews and the local social pressures would cause friction and give characters choices to make. These choices drive the plot and keep the audience wondering what will happen next. I lean heavily on real-world examples because I think it's smart for artists to model the complexity of their fictional worlds after the complexity we see in our own. But here's how this concept works in fantasy worlds. As Farrah Mendelsohn writes in her book, The Rhetorics of Fantasy, one stock type of fantasy story is the portal quest, in which the protagonist either steps through a portal into another world or travels to a far and distant place. Usually the protagonist is a character the audience can relate to, a surrogate for us in the fictional world. The journey usually features a somewhat clueless character encountering wildly different places than those that they're used to, noting and reflecting on these differences. The Lord of the Rings is the archetypal example, as Frodo and his hobbit companions, who are untraveled and understand little of the politics of Middle-earth, journey diagonally across the continent, encountering new people and experiencing different societies. The much more experienced Gandalf and Aragorn frequently tell the hobbits how to behave and what to or not to say as they go from place to place. Another excellent example is the novel A Game of Thrones, where a large portion of the plot follows the stories of a large cast of characters spread over a large, diverse continent. A good part of it deals with Ned Stark's struggles to deal with the backstabbing politics of King's Landing, which is so radically different from his life in the North, as well as Tyrion Lannister's indirect voyage back home that brings him in contact with people of different classes and different cultures of different kingdoms. Having characters out of their element allows storytellers to explain to the audience how the world works as these characters learn to adapt and survive in their new environment. Compared to Lord of the Rings, the characters in Game of Thrones have no wise, experienced characters telling the protagonists the truth about how things are. There's lots of lying, lots of deceit, and the characters have to figure things out on their own. Here's a good exercise to test the coherence of your world-building project. Go to your catalog and randomly draw 2 characters, 2 locations, and an item, and try and tell a story about how all those entries would interact. Why are these people in this place? How hard was it for them to get there? How would they feel about each other? How does the item fit in? Stories worth telling are often about the unusual, the out of the ordinary, a chance or surprise meeting, the journey to the unknown place. Repeat this catalog process 3 or 4 times and think through how these different combinations could lead to different stories. Or, if there's a single character you know you want as your protagonist, examine your map and determine where this character would feel most uncomfortable, most out of place. Figure out what would cause them to go there, the different societies they would encounter, and what challenges they would face along the way. Remember, too, that great adventure stories often involve detours, shortcuts gone wrong, and characters happening to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. This random catalog exercise provides a built-in sense of uncertainty and unpredictability. Try embracing it for your next story. Hopefully, you're now seeing how all these steps in the process, from establishing a foundation with a world's scope, sequence, and perspective, the 4 structural and 14 substructural categories, populating the catalog with a diversity of people, places, and things, and then pinning those entries to a map, can turn your world-building project into a coherent, consistent, story-generating engine. Find the points of tension in these societies and identify what characters have the most interesting or compelling problems, and you can't help but find some compelling story material. In the 10th and final video in this series, I'll be talking more about telling stories in your fictional world. Thanks for watching.